right, so Proverbs chapter 9. This whole chapter is basically wisdom versus folly, which is, in a nutshell, a lot of what Proverbs is. It's, choose wisdom, don't choose folly. But that's easier said than done because our flesh wants to choose folly. It's not really a conscious thing. We're not trying to choose the wrong path. It's really easy to choose laziness. It's easy to choose to complain about things. It's easy to steal if something's available. I mean, there's a whole mindset that goes into that you can get into. I learned there was actually a counselor of prisoners, and he said he had to quit counseling them because he started thinking like a thief. And he found that was not healthy. But he would look at people and go, they're an easy mark. They're not paying attention to their purse or something. Poor Hannah got her wallet stolen. She just laid it down for a minute. And next thing you know, it's gone. So, but it's easy to do the wrong thing. It's hard to do the right thing. I listened to Jocko Willink, who's an ex-Navy SEAL, and he has a lot of book reviews about military stuff, and he doesn't call it motivational, he just calls it this is common sense. But he says, do the hard thing. And I think that's kind of, if you take a lot of the stuff that we go over and you just kind of crunch it down, I think that's actually a pretty good thing to do, because we never want to do the hard thing because it's hard. I always want to do the easy thing. Kelly and I always say to each other, there's a book that says the first rule is nothing's ever easy. And that's not quite true. Every once in a while, something is easy, but usually not. It's very, very, very rare. You'll think something will be easy. You'll go, you'll try it, and it won't be easy, and then you'll be frustrated if you're me or most guys I know. So, wisdom versus folly. Wisdom is quite literally, in some cases, out there calling. And I think you can make a parallel to Jesus and accepting Christ. God is calling people. We send missionaries out, and there is all sorts of common sense and wise advice and things like that, but there's all sorts of other bad things out there too. So in the first part of chapter 9, we have this illustration of a feast. Wisdom has set forth a feast, and if you read it and draw some things out of it, it looks like it's probably a beautiful mansion, kind of like we would have in heaven. And she's killed her beasts and mingled her wine, which means basically mixed her wine with water, made it ready to drink. She's furnished the table, so you got all the food and drink and everything, and then she just needs people to come and dine. I think of the song, come and dine at the master's table, and that's kind of what this is portraying. She sends forth her maidens, so she's sending forth emissaries or missionaries to try to draw people in, to choose wisdom. And that's really what we want. We want that for our children. We want that for ourselves. I told you repeatedly, I pray for wisdom. I prayed for lots of different things. I prayed for discipline, I prayed for temperance, I prayed, things that, and then I prayed for far more specific things. But really, I just kind of boiled it down to, I just pray for wisdom every day for myself. And then I pray for everybody else with their more specific needs usually. I'll pray for my specific needs as well. But if you can get wisdom, that's the principal thing. And so if you start with wisdom, I truly believe that everything else will build upon that. So if we can get wisdom pounded into our kids, they may not, at least if we get the knowledge, because sometimes we conflate those two, the knowledge and understanding. Sometimes we treat wisdom as if it is just the knowledge and understanding, but you have to have, those are separate components. So the actual wisdom part is carrying it out, and I'll actually give some evidence for it later in this chapter. But if we can get that knowledge and understanding into our kids, even if they make a mistake, they're more likely to learn from that. They'll go, you know what? I knew this wasn't going to work. I knew this was wrong. I did it, and it blew up in my face. And now they've got a little bit more knowledge and more understanding, and Lord willing, if they're faced with that again, they will not make the same mistake. I mean, in my life, I've made the same mistake repeatedly, and I still struggle with some things, and I'm still working on them, and I'm trying to learn the lessons. But I'm actively trying to learn the lessons. Okay, if you're a passive learner, guess what? You get to repeat the class again. Okay, if you're not really trying very hard, you fail the class, and you get to do it again. So, learn the lessons that God has for you. Choose the wisdom. Eat of the bread, drink of the wine, forsake the foolish, and go in the way of understanding. All right, so new content starts in chapter 9, verse 7. He that reproveth a scorner getteth to himself shame, and he that rebuketh a wicked man getteth himself a blot. Reprove not a scorner, lest he hate thee. Rebuke a wise man, and he will love thee. Give instruction to a wise man, and he will be yet wiser. Teach a just man, and he will increase in learning. This is a kind of an interesting section, because when you learn stuff, you want to share it. When you gain knowledge and understanding, and like you've had this light flipped on in your life, and you realize, aha, here's the path. Here's the way that leads to righteousness. Here's the way that makes my life happier. You want to share that knowledge, but you kind of have to be a little careful how you share the knowledge, who you share it with. Some people don't want to hear it. I think part of this here is the words that are used, reprove and rebuke. You have to be really, really careful reproving or rebuking anybody. I feel generally free to reprove and rebuke my own children, and when my children were growing up and when there were other young children and I was the adult, I would occasionally rebuke those children too. But when they're older, you have to be a little bit more careful. You have to use a little bit more judgment. If you're gonna, even if you do it in a spirit of kind of love, you really need to know who you're talking to, because it can backfire on you. And it plainly says not to reprove a scorner. He that reproveth a scorner getteth to himself shame. You'll go to somebody with kind of an open heart and a tender spirit, and you'll just be like, hey, could you not swear so much? The Bible says, says that that's perverse speech. You shouldn't talk like that. Well, if this is somebody like, I don't know, a dock worker who, votes blue and is a member of the, I saw there was a Satanic Club of America recently, and they claim not to worship Satan. They have that as a name to basically offend all the Christians out there. So, if you're going to tell this person not to swear because the Bible says it's perverse speech, yeah, they're gonna attack you quite viciously. If you're trying to reprove somebody who is not saved, it is you really want to be careful. You got to know that person really well, and you got to do it with a very careful attitude. So that's something to be careful of, because not only can it give a shame, which was basically you're embarrassed now. They're mocking you. He's going to go and get all his friends, and they're going to mock you, and it's going to embarrass you. And then they could very well point out this next section, he that rebuketh the wicked man getteth himself a blot. I mean, a wicked and a scorner, you can draw separation there, but really they're both wicked, and a wicked man will also be a scorner. You know what they're going to do? I'll tell you what they're going to do. They're going to say, hey, I heard you say something the other day. You'll be like, I didn't know anybody heard that. I dropped something on my foot and it hurt really bad. I didn't mean to. It's like, yeah, well, you're accusing me of you're telling me not to do something and you do it. I mean, that happens all the time. So this isn't like a chronic issue where we go and we tell other people what not to do, but it does kind of get to be a problem when you've learned something, you want to share it, you want to encourage people. So you have to realize who you're talking to. And so I would generally offer you the advice of rebuking somebody or reproving or even offering advice to somebody that's unsaved is something you should do with great, great caution, if ever. More practical example, Forrest is in class down in Goodfellow Air Base in Texas, and so he's doing these classes on signals intelligence and whatnot. He has different instructors, and the Air Force instructors are pretty reasonable. It's fine. Well, they got a Marine instructor in there who took 2 days worth of content and crammed it into a morning. And Forrest is fairly flexible, more so than me. He's like, yeah, that was kind of rough. And he's like, it made some of the other guys mad, and like they don't like him very much. And so he was thinking, just thinking, mind you, about trying to talk to the instructor. It's like, hey, you're kind of making enemies out of these guys, or they're not receiving your message very well, and if you just dialed it down a little or something. He's like, but he knew that was unwise. And I said, it could be the guy's just a jerk, or it could be a very, deliberate strategy. One of the things they do in the military is they put you under pressure. They want to train you and force you to be under the pressure so that if you get in a situation like that in real life, you will not crumble, because it's going to be worse in real life, because it's going to be real. There's an example, practical example of that. When they do the crucible, which is 2.5 days, basically, it's not no sleep, but it's like 4 hours of sleep, 4 to 6 hours, and not much food, 2.5 MREs. So instead of 1 MRE a meal, they're giving you, 1 MRE per day, and since you got 2.5 days. Why do they do that? Well, when the U.S. invaded Iraq in 2003, they sent forth this recon. I don't remember if it was probably a division. It wouldn't have been division. I don't know how large it was. I don't want to use the wrong term, but they sent forth a recon group as kind of like tip of the spear. And recon are supposed to go out, see what's out there, and then come back and report. Well, they were using them to poke holes through stuff and rush ahead, which irritated the recon guys because they're like, that's not what we're designed to do. We're trained, highly trained to do this special reconnaissance. But whatever. The Marines are going to use you however they want to use you. And then at one point, they were tasked with something from General Mattis, who later became Secretary of Defense, and they were trying to rush forward and get to this point, and they had a truck breakdown. And they could have fixed it. But instead, they left it behind. And so what did it have in it? Well, nothing they couldn't live without. Well, turns out they actually left their company standards, stuff that they'd had for years and years and years, and that got lost. And that was bad. But they also left a whole bunch of food. So they were down to, guess what, 1 MRE a day. So that's kind of a side note. I don't know if that directly relates to Proverbs, but it does, we do have pressures and stresses in our lives. And God throughout our life, when you're young, you have these trials. And every time you have a trial come along, you can go, oh, woe is me, and that's what I did. Or you can say, well, we'll get through this because I trust God. And in everything give thanks. When God says, in everything give thanks, he doesn't mean in some things give thanks. He means in everything give thanks. And I know that's brutally hard, especially in times of severe trial or, whatever. But I have learned, or I'm learning, I have a tendency to overreact, and I want to try to fix things. It's like, you know what? I read something, they said, one of the ways you can handle stress is not overreact, you underreact. Doesn't mean you don't react at all. You don't have to solve that problem immediately. Take some time to think about it. Pray, breathe. And all these things are helpful. When you get stressed out, you actually literally lose some of your mental capacity because your blood gets flooded, or your brain gets flooded with cortisol, and it's designed for kind of a fight or flight thing, as part of, adrenaline as well. But so your body goes into this fight or flight mechanism, which is a physical thing, and your brain function actually decreases. It's why a lot of people, they crack up under pressure, or in baseball or football, they'll choke because the pressure has increased. It decreases their mental capacity and their ability to perform. So God tries to prepare us for that, but we need to accept the trials. We need to accept the training as we get it. And he promises us that we won't ever be pushed beyond that which we can endure. So don't reprove scorners or wicked men. Reprove not a scorner lest he hate thee. You're not going to make any friends. You have very possibly shut a door for witnessing. I'm not saying there's never a time to rebuke scorners. If you're doing it personally, you got to realize if you're doing it to them, what the outcome's going to be. I think that, if Kelly stands up here and he talks about Joel Osteen and whatnot, that's warning you about wolves. That's different. So give instruction to a wise man and he will yet be wiser. Teach a just man and he will increase in learning. So that's what we're trying to do here. We're trying to teach you. We're trying to edify you, raise you up. What point is there of me standing up here and flapping my gums if nobody gets anything out of it? I know Proverbs is pretty simple. Sometimes I'm like, well, what do I say here? This is really obvious. But hopefully, I pray that there's some, value in the things that I say, and that you can, these are fundamentals, right? But I forget them on a daily basis. And I'm not stupid. I don't consider myself a fool, but I'll forget stuff. When something happens, that cortisol floods through my brain, and I, people say, well, pray about it. And I'm like, well, I did pray, but I got to calm down. I really got to go to God in prayer and take it to him and not try to fix it myself. We need to give God our burdens. He literally says that. It's not our problem. Now, he will tell us what to do. He will help us handle it. And sometimes he doesn't give us the answers. When you're struggling with a health problem or something, poor Jimmy is crippled in pain, It's a trial. It's a burden. It's frustrating. It's sad. But it gives us something to look forward to as well. And that's our bodies. When Pastor McComb was here, there is coming a day, It was a fantastic song. I love that song. It's one song where my whole family has that memorized. There's coming a day when we won't have, heartaches and pain. So, if you have a good relationship, but even if you don't, if you know somebody that's a just man or a wise man, you can still teach them because they will be able to separate criticism from actual critique. Like if you want, or constructive criticism, sometimes they'll say, do you want some constructive criticism? Some people don't want, they're not mature enough, and I put myself in that camp. If somebody says something to me, pastor comes up to me after the message and he says, yeah, it was good, but here's how you could do better. It'll hurt, but I'll get over the hurt and I'll try to fix what could be better. I've always wanted my dad because my dad taught for years and he taught Sunday school. I wanted my dad to see me teach. But now I don't think I do. Every time my dad was over here, for some reason, I wasn't able to teach. And it was probably because my dad, when you've done something forever and you've taught speech class and everything, it's really easy for you to say, well, yeah, I'd give you a C+ or something. You said too many times, you didn't make eye contact, you didn't stand up straight, I have a tendency to lean over, things like that. And, that can be really discouraging, especially if you think you did a good job. So, but if you're a mature person, you should be able to still take that and apply it. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, and the knowledge of the holy is understanding. For by me thy days shall be multiplied, and the years of thy life shall be increased. If thou be wise, thou shalt be wise for thyself. But if thou scornest, thou alone shalt bear it. So I talked about the fear of the Lord. I brought that up over time. And fear of the Lord, there's lots of verses there. Fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, is how one of them starts, and the fear of the Lord is beginning of wisdom. Wisdom is always the one that I've kind of stuck in my head. Either way, you have to have knowledge and understanding to get to wisdom. Wisdom, knowledge, understanding, those are all pieces of the puzzle. You can't have one without the other two. So the knowledge of the holy. Understanding God helps us understand how we can do better in our lives. For by me, wisdom, thy days shall be multiplied, and the years of thy life shall be increased. So, is this a universal thing? Yeah, it actually is. I was thinking okay, well, what about the wicked? And they don't live, there are some wicked that lived a long time. Well, inevitably, there's something that the wicked have done in their life that they've changed. Some wicked behavior that they've stopped doing, because wicked people, when they engage in wicked behavior, when they give themselves fully over to it, they will die an early death. If you drink alcohol your entire life, you will die of something like cirrhosis of the liver. You just will. If you do meth, same thing. You might end up in a shootout with cops, or, there was a guy, I told you about the story once in Seattle. I saw him on a documentary, and a year later, he ended up in this, he killed somebody and ran, and then they found him dead in some sort of chemical pool inside of a warehouse. The cops knew this guy by his first name. But, this individual literally chose drugs. I saw him interviewed, and this kind of blew my mind, because I always thought people who were on drugs didn't want to be. Once they got addicted, once they were out on the streets and homeless, I thought they still didn't want to be. And if they could not be anymore, they would. This gentleman, and I've heard some things since then, showed me they are still choosing that very actively. It's not like, oh, I hate this, I don't want to do this, but I'm still going to do it. No, he's like, I love meth. It's awesome. He was just so happy about it. A year later, this guy's dead in a very noteworthy way, because I wasn't following him on Twitter or something. I just happened to read this article about him dying. So, in order for you to have a longer life, you have to have some common sense. And that common sense is biblical sense. It's Bible-based. Whenever you read these books, there can be meat in these self-help books. There can also be a lot of nonsense that can mess you up. But there's frequently good advice. And that good advice is, I have yet to find something where the good advice you can't trace back to biblical origins. If thou be wise, thou shalt be wise for thyself, but if thou scornest, thou alone shalt bear it. Sometimes when I read these verses, I'm a little confused because I read them and I think, but if thou scornest, so only you alone are bearing it, but if you scornest, but if you're wise, that made me think that you'd be wise for other people, but it says, anyway, that's just me being confused as I go through this, and then I read it a few times. And I like to, when I read stuff, when I go through this, I'm not, like, I don't sit there and at my desk with all my books out like Kelly does. That's awesome that he does that. That's not me. I, lots of times, read in bed or in my chair, my comfy chair, because I'm too lazy to go sit at the table, although sometimes I will read at the table. But I try to read through these things and read through them multiple times. And I try to pray about it and let God help show me the answer. And I have found that I might not understand the first time, but if I really want to know, I'll go back and I'll reread it. And I will ask for understanding. And I'll put a question mark by stuff. And most of the time I can figure this stuff out. I do get some value from the commentaries, but honestly, those people aren't, I mean, a lot of them are smart and they've got good training and stuff, but there's so many other bad commentaries out there that it's kind of amazing how God will show us the understanding of this. Now, this isn't the biggest deal in the world, but it's just saying, if you're wise for yourself. But if you're not wise, if thou scornest, then you're going to suffer it. You're going to bear it. You're going to bear the burden. And this is really, you reap what you sow. It's just another way of saying, when you're wise, you're benefiting yourself. And if you're a scorner, a foolish person, you're going to suffer it. Reap what you sow is a common sense thing, and we have it in Hindu or Hinduism. You know, they've got karmic retribution. And so people now say, oh, that's karma. It's just, so you can say it's karma because it's in our vernacular today. It's in our normal speech. But it's just the biblical principle of you reap what you sow. So if you're cruel to people to get ahead and you step on them, you're going to reap something bad in the future. Because nobody likes being stepped on. That's just the way it is. I had an interesting exchange with an ex-colleague, and they finally decided at my previous company, which I've been out of for 4 months at least, they decided to backfill my position. When you leave a job, it's always nice to know if they want to backfill you, because that means you were useful. You were doing something. If they don't backfill you, it's kind of like, well, that's kind of insulting. But apparently, they decided after 4 months, they really did need to backfill me. And so I went, somebody else actually asked me about the job, and I looked at it, and of course it pays way more than I was making, right? But, I said, I told the guy I wasn't interested, and he's like, well, everybody asked if they knew somebody who'd be good for this job, and somebody said, one of my ex-colleagues said, Grant, and then everybody else agreed, So it's kind of nice, that my colleagues would be really happy if I came back. I won't. As much as, I do what God tells me to do. If he told me to go back, I'd go back. But there's a reason, and God moved things around so that I moved on. So remember when you mistreat people, and remember, be nice to people it doesn't really cost you anything, does it? If you don't get, if you and another colleague are up for some position and you say something nice to your commanding officer or your boss about the other guy, and you say he'd be a good worker or he'd be a good boss or something, and that other guy gets the promotion, so you don't get the promotion, you're not really suffering, because now you got a good boss. And God didn't want you to have that job. It's something we really have to remember and that's why one of the reasons we need to pray about stuff. It's because you don't want to make a mistake. You don't want to go marry the wrong woman, get the wrong job, buy the wrong car or the wrong house or whatever. You don't want to make those decisions without God, I mean, if you eat the wrong food today, you're probably only going to suffer heartburn. Probably worst case, it might cause, it might give you food poisoning or something like that. You should pray about food too. But if you don't, the consequences, the lasting consequences are a lot less. So always be nice to people. You're never suffering. Even if you think you did, it's still good. And you can say, I've seen life is good. And it's like, well, life can be brutal, it can be hard, and it can be nasty and everything. But God is blessing us. Therefore, that is true. Life is good. The Jocko guy I mentioned earlier, he has a phrase. He's like, he always says good to anything that happens. I didn't get that job. I didn't get that promotion. I didn't get this. I didn't get that. And he just says good to it. And I think that is a biblical response. It's definitely not a natural response, but it is how we should react. Because if we've taken it to prayer, and sometimes even, if we haven't, it's God's will being worked out. It's just, are we in submission to what he wants? Sorry. All right. Let's try to wrap up here. A foolish woman is clamorous. She is simple. This is verse 13. And knoweth nothing. For she sitteth at the door of her house on a seat in the high places of the city, to call passengers who go right on their ways. Whoso is simple, let him turn in hither. And as for him that wanteth understanding, she saith to him, stolen waters are sweet, and bread eaten in secret is pleasant. But he knoweth not that the dead are there, and that her guests are in the depths of hell. So, beginning of the chapter, we have wisdom calling you. Now we have folly calling. Okay? Folly is easier to choose because that's what your flesh wants. It's the easier path. And it's seductive. It will call you. We've got this strange woman out there trying to lure you in. Here's the thing. She's simple too. She doesn't know anything either. Wisdom's a woman, but she's a smart woman. She's a godly woman. Folly is a simple, ignorant woman, and I don't want to get in trouble for saying anything negative about women. In this day and age, you cannot criticize certain groups without suffering. But this is what God says. This folly is a foolish woman, clamorous. That's noisy. Have we ever seen a noisy woman? Probably on a YouTube clip or something. I mean that's kind of the Karen thing. The Karen is more kind of doesn't mind her own business and stuff like that. But I mean, you can pick certain ethnic groups and just think, oh yeah, which isn't necessarily fair, but there's a certain cultures that have certain attitudes. So this noisy, ignorant woman is calling you. And as we've talked before about the strange woman trying to seduce, which just means to get you to do something wrong, that's what we have here as well. For she sitteth at the door of her house on a seat in the high places of the city. So, someplace that's very visible, to call passengers who go right on their ways. So someplace with a lot of traffic. And she's calling, whoso is simple, let him turn in hither. So somebody else who's simple. Now, a simple person doesn't have to be a fool. A simple person starts out just ignorant. Kind of like a mold of, block of clay. And you can mold them into something greater, or you can mold them into something worse. It can be useless, or it can be, turned into a pot. God's the potter, we're the clay. So we're supposed to be yielding and submissive to the potter. We're not, I'm sure if you talk to some potter, they can tell you about all the different types of clay and how this clay works really good and this clay doesn't. And, Anyway, the point of the whole matter is that we need to be submissive to God, and that's why we need to talk to God a lot and ask God's opinion on stuff instead of coming up with our own opinion and then asking God to give us our way. So, whoso is simple, if you haven't gone into the wise feast earlier, come in hither. So come to this woman. As for him that wanteth understanding. Now, when you read this, wanteth understanding. So this is somebody who wants understanding, right? No. Wanteth means you lack. Okay? So we use want as like, ooh, I want this, I desire this. But we want understanding, we lack understanding. So we've kind of conflated, we've changed the meaning of want from want to desire. Therefore, don't read that as this is what I want. Don't ever do that in the Bible because it's going to be wrong. So, as for him that lacks understanding, she saith to him, quote, stolen waters are sweet, and bread eaten in secret is pleasant, unquote. What does that mean? It means sin is pleasant for a season. Hebrews 11:25. Choosing rather to suffer affliction with the people of God than to enjoy the pleasures of sin for a season. Okay? Sin can be very unpleasant, but it's usually the side effects, right? It's the hangover. It's the, whatever. I don't want, it's your body's a temple. If we eat too much and we poison our bodies, that's the next thing you know, we have joint pain, back pain, diabetes, heart disease, stuff like that. If you smoke cigarettes your entire life, you might end up with lung cancer. That's how Pastor McComb went. Very sad, right? It's not, smoking cigarettes is wrong, but when you do something that ends up hurting your body, as I can attest to, then your body suffers. So, that's why no matter what it is, let's diet, exercise, avoid drugs, alcohol, even tobacco, not just tobacco, but nicotine even, or not nicotine, caffeine, coffee, anything. That's the perfect thing, right? Unfortunately, we don't live in the perfect world and we're flawed people. But stolen waters are sweet and bread eaten in secret is pleasant. So it feels naughty. Naughty has this connotation to it now of not really bad, even though it is in the Bible. Naughty's bad. It's like naughty, mischievous. Well, mischievous is bad too. Well, I get really annoyed about the word decadent. Decadent's a good word, but decadent, chocolate cake, that one annoys me. I actually asked somebody, this was 20 years ago, an office, 3 women, and I said, what do you think decadent means? I asked 3 different women. They all thought it was naughty or, ooh, this is lots of calories or something. It's no, it's decay. Something's decadent is broken down, it's bad, it's, you don't use decadent usually on material things, we use it more for culture, but when we have a decadent culture, our culture is wicked. We have a decadent culture right now, right? And some people are trying to fight against us, against it, but it's mostly a losing battle. And decadent decay all goes to death. That goes to what we have in this world when we don't, if we're not constantly managing something. If I don't take care of my house, it breaks down. If I don't take care of my car, it breaks down. If you don't take care of your body, well, guess what? It's going to break down eventually anyway, but it'll break down a lot sooner if you don't take care of it. So, but you want to speed that up? Then follow the foolish woman who says, and this is what you get in verse 19, this simple guy does not know the consequences of the sin. It says, but he knoweth not that the dead are there, and that her guests are in the depths of hell. So folly wants to distract you, get you off the path, and then destroy you. That's sin, right? That's what Satan wants. He wants to pull us away from church, and he wants to destroy us. If he can't destroy us, he can't literally destroy us. Our souls are sealed by the Holy Spirit, but he can make us ineffective in this world. And that happens to Christians, no matter how old, how mature they are. It happens. People get tired. People get angry. Sometimes people they've done right their whole life, and then they just kind of get frustrated, and they're like, you know what? What has this ever gotten me? And they go, you know what? I want to be bad for once. This stuff happens. So it's something we can never let our guard down on. It's frustrating that it seems like we can't get past it, or at least I can't. I have to constantly remind myself of things out of the Bible, to try not to tear things down, to not complain, to be thankful always in everything. Trust me, there have been many things this week that I've complained about. I'm trying to be thankful for them. I'm trying to trust in God. But the simple person doesn't know the consequences of their sin. But we are not simple. We know. And that is the end of chapter 9.